friends. Your school review? School अच्छा नहीं करना है nothing but.
हम बोरिंग लग रहा है.
से आगे बढ़ गए. अभी 10th स्टैंडर्ड में कौन बोलता है स्कूल अच्छा नहीं लग रहा है?
पढ़ाई के साथ होता है.
पढ़ाई के साथ होता है कभी सैंडल उसका बर्थडे है सब मैच बुक में कोई सेशन सिर्फ हेयर क्लिप के बिना हेयर क्लिप वो भी कर लेती चमेली का फूल है क्या चमेली का ब्लू वाला रोज आ गया रोज चलो अभी done with the chapter life versus I think over no
Yes.
execution the last part of the chapter over
Yes, sir.
hemodialysis and all that over right so today we are going to start with आज वो R environment complete कर ले छोटा सा एक chapter है R environment is nothing much to discuss but that's a small chapter let us complete that chapter today
What test is
फिजिक्स पीछे बदलते हैं अपन. उनका सर है.
नहीं स्कूल वही मैं सोच रही है भी वही सोचू भाई मेरे को तो अभी तक कल तक दिखा रहा सुबह तक ही दिखा रहा था so take out your volume R environment you can refer to the text as well as the volume text बाद में पढ़ो पहले volume में देखो because volume everything is in points easy for you to understand take out your volume let us start R environment R environment in this chapter there is R environment is volume 2 right volume 2 है actually one of my volume 1 I'll ask if he has extra copies you can just refer and रोज सोए के 7 तारीख 12 तारीख हमने कौन सा बना किया था भाई Don't write anything up. कुछ नहीं लिखना है मुझे Our environment page 182. Turn to page 182. Now, most of the things are very common here. We have somewhere or the other studied about all these concepts. So, most of them are very general concepts except for energy flow, I suppose. Energy flow, you may find some difficulties understanding the law. Let us start with this concept. Our environment, look into the first concept there, ecosystem. You may, since you don't have your volume now, keep your notebook aside. And certain points which are important, just take a note of those words. Later you know that these are certain things I have to read from the volume. ये chapter straight volume से पढ़ो. And text also you have to read. But volume से सारे points very clearly we have mentioned. You can frame answers straight away from the points. Yeah. So look into that. The concept of our environment. Let us start. The first thing is an ecosystem. What's an ecosystem? Are you aware what is an ecosystem? Ecosystem meaning like all types of creatures the living and the non-living component interacting together. That is
dependent on each other.
Dependent on each other. So I would say a lake is a ecosystem, desert is a ecosystem, no? A garden is a ecosystem. So like this, we can talk about any type of an environment. An environment which has a living and a non-living component. Living components are known as biotic components, non-living components are known as abiotic components, and living and non-living components are interacting with each other. So the first thing that you have to remember, topics, just remember they write in your notebook, just reference. You don't have to write any description, कुछ नहीं लिखना है, खाली topics लिख के रखो. Ecosystem, types of ecosystem you have to refer. I said the word ecosystem always means it is a self-sustainable community. Self-sustainable meaning what? It is self-satisfactory. Like our homes, we are satisfied in our homes. We have all the food and the clothes and the shelter and everything. Same like that. So it is self-sustainable, it is known as. What are the types? Natural and artificial. What is the meaning? Natural ecosystem meaning?
It is naturally specific.
Meaning there is no human interference. So natural ecosystem, what are some examples? A desert, lake, a forest, ponds mostly man-made. Lake you can say, river you can say, mountains you can say, the forest you can say. But if I talk about an agricultural land, that's artificial ecosystem. Human manipulation is there. So the moment I talk about human manipulation, that is not a natural ecosystem. I talk about a fruit garden. What about a fruit garden? Artificial. Okay, man-made. What about a ocean? Natural. But what about an aquarium? Artificial. So you understand this concept? So what are the two types? You have to study properly, natural and artificial ecosystems. Go to the next one. Components of ecosystem. Components. What are the components? Components are living and non-living. Living, biotic, non-living, abiotic. So now that I talk about biotic and abiotic, now biotic and abiotic, what are the differences? Let me just finish with abiotic first. Abiotic would include the soil and the water and the humidity and the temperature and all these. Biotic, the components are again subdivided. What are the biotic components? The first category, can you see there? Producers. Meaning what? You have already come across this word, producers. Organisms which can make their own food. Either they must be having some special enzymes like the chemotrophic, or they must be having the special pigment like the autotrophic, photoautotrophic. So when we are talking about producers, what about the grasses and the plants and the marigold? All are producers. The marigold plant I talk about, the mango tree I talk about, the grasses I talk about, all. What is common in all of them? They are all producers. They are all producers. Now come to the next one, consumers. So producers are one category. See, there are various examples given there. Apart from plants, what are the other producers? Green algae. Algae. Apart from plants, what are the? Give two examples of producers. What will you write in your paper? Plants to algae, blue-green algae, and few bacteria.
Blue-green algae is a bacteria, not algae.
Blue-green algae is a algal form. Algae और bacteria में structurally difference थोड़ा सा है. Bacteria even more simpler होता है. Algae is bit more complex. Bit complex. So when I talk about algae, there are so many types. जैसे if I talk about the green color of the ocean, the blue color of the sea is only because of the type of the algae in millions. No. So there are different types of water bodies. You are already studied. Brown colored water bodies होता है, red colored water bodies होता है. It's because of the type of the algae growing there. So whatever the type of algae, they are more or less capable of producing food. And blue-green algae is the most widely occurring. Blue-green algae. So examples of producers. Remember, take a note. Examples of producers. समझ में आना चाहिए. Heterotrophs. What is the meaning? You know that this concept in photosynthesis we have studied. Heterotrophs. What is the meaning of heterotrophs? Organisms which cannot make their own food. कितना बड़ा है वो गैलन का? कितना बड़ा है? आवाज तो इतना बड़ा था. So now, when we are talking about the heterotrophs, what are heterotrophs? Definition is very simple. You know that. You'll have to share the book. Huh? You have volume 2 है, NCERT तो है. I am referring from the volume first of all because इसमें points लिखना है. Text तो definitely you have to read, but you read majorly from the volume for this chapter. Achha, now heterotrophs I am talking about. The concept of heterotrophs is known. What are heterotrophs? Organisms which cannot manufacture food. अभी heterotrophs के काफी सारे categories होते हैं. Heterotrophs. Some categories already have studied. No, heterotrophs can be saprophytic, holozoite, all this parasitic. We already studied that. So something similar we are going to talk about. Heterotrophic organisms, they cannot manufacture their own food. Go to the next page. What are the different types of heterotrophs? You can share. 2 books are there. दो जन एक साथ बैठो and share. 4 जन एक साथ बैठने की जरूरत नहीं है. UP has enough space. दो जन बैठो. After that, if anybody is coming, we'll get 50 more books. Now, what are the different types of heterotrophs? Number 1, herbivores. Give you an example of herbivore. So, समझ में क्या आया? What are herbivores?
They are the ones
Organisms which are directly dependent on producers, plants. So, क्या लिखना है? Definition, basic concept क्या लिखना है? What are herbivores? Herbivores are heterotrophs which are or consumers which are directly dependent on producers. Directly dependent on producer. A deer feeding on some shrubs, herbivore है. The rabbit feeding on some fruits, herbivore है. So when I talk about all these examples, the goat and the sheep and the cattle, they are directly feeding on some or the other plant parts. Maybe the leaves, maybe the fruit, maybe the entire plant. But ultimately, they are directly feeding on the plant. That is herbivore. Then how are carnivores different? Give it to example.
on animals only like lion.
Carnivores are directly dependent on herbivores or other animals or smaller carnivores. So I talk about the foxes and the lion and the tiger. They will never feed on a plant or a seed or a leaf. They will only and only feed on flesh of other animals, carnivores. Omnivores example
Both they both like
directly food, plant food also and animal food also. Bear and crow, human. Crow is scavenger also at the same time. Crow is scavenger also and omnivore also. So omnivore. So when we are talking about certain type of birds, certain type of mammals, they can directly feed on plant food as well as animal food. So omnivore. Parasites, the concept of parasites, you know. Can we give 2 examples of parasites?
they cannot prevent them.
Venus flytrap parasitic plant hai, but here major examples of animal parasites. Tapeworms. Tapeworms feed on digested nutrients of the cattle. Cattle is the host. I talk about leech. Leech feed on digested nutrients of the human body, other animal body. So any organism which does not digest food on its own and remains attached to some other organisms to obtain nourishment, that is a parasite. So with the concept of parasitic nutrition that you had studied in life processes, there also it come across. The concept of parasitic nutrition was what? In the concept of parasitic nutrition, we had come across parasites like the liver fluke in the intestine. Liver fluke is a small leaf-shaped parasite which is present in the liver, inside the liver of cattle. Then we have got the tapeworm inside the intestine of cattle, vertebrates. Roundworm inside the intestine. So like this, hookworm, so many different type of parasites are there. Parasites. Now we talk about decomposers. Tell me 2 examples of decomposers.
Mushroom, bacteria, fungi.
2 examples of decomposers. Mushroom is not a decomposer. Mushroom is a saprophyte. Fungi. 2 examples of decomposers I asked you. Bacteria. Fungi. So majorly bacteria play the role of decomposition. a dead animal on the surface of the soil, dead plant parts on the surface of the soil, the decomposition is not brought about by any other animal form apart from bacteria. So what is the concept of decomposition? Is the process of decomposition beneficial? Yes. Is the process of decomposition beneficial? How? Number one, since the bacteria, now that the dead pigeon, say suppose, I talk about a dead pigeon on the surface of the soil. I talk about a dead pigeon on the surface of the soil. I talk about the ripe fruits, the dead flowers on the surface of the soil. What happens?
They decompose.
They start decomposing. So now that the dead animal or the plant part is on the surface of the soil, in 1 month's time you get to see that that part of the soil is progressively becoming brown and then black. Becoming brown and then black. Why? What has happened? The process of decomposition has happened. In another 2 months' time, you will come across that with the water and the process of decomposition, they are almost getting mixed with the soil. And that part of the soil is actually now more fertile. Why? So much of organic content has got mixed with the soil. And the uppermost layer of the soil is actually black, and that is the most fertile layer of the soil known as the humus. Right? So what are some of the benefits of decomposition? You are asked this in the paper also. What are some of the benefits of decomposition? Benefits of decomposition, number one, it adds nutrients to the soil. Makes the soil fertile, develops the humus layer, which is the most fertile layer of the soil. Then because of the process of decomposition, the soil becomes porous, aerated. What is the meaning of aerated? Air can trap in. And if air can trap in, that soil will always be rich in microbes. Nitrogen rich because the process of trapping of the...
And that soil used for agriculture.
Yes, so this type of soil is very good for agriculture, humus rich soil. What else? If the process of decomposition is happening, then this soil will always be retaining water. Water retaining capacity of the soil increases. So if the water retaining capacity of the soil increases, this soil is very good for cultivation, crop vegetation. So if I talk about the soil, the black soil of a garden, or the sandy soil of the desert, which one is more fertile and why? The black soil of the garden or the forest is more fertile because constantly the parts, plant parts, animal parts are falling there, and the soil conditions being wet, process of decomposition happens very fast.
Absorption of black soil is more than
Water absorption is much more. But in case of the sandy soil, what's happening? Even if the dead plant is there, the dead animal or the plant is there,
because the sand is dry.
sand is dry, microbial growth is not there, aeration is not there. So if they are carried away long distances, then the decomposition, otherwise they are just getting dug and long distance they remain partially decomposed. They don't undergo decomposition very fast as in case of the forest-like conditions. Look into those points, take a note. Importance of decomposers, what I have discussed just now, has to be studied properly. There are 4 to 5 points as you should know. Let me read out. The decomposers help in decomposing the dead bodies. Just now I have mentioned this. Talking about cleansing of the environment. Yes, constantly the dead parts of the animal, if the dead parts of the plant and the animal on the surface of the soil, if microbes were not there, just think, then any part of the land today would have been heaps and heaps of dead parts of the plant and dead parts of the animal. But the dead parts of the plant and the animal fall, and in a period of 3-4 months they vanish away. They get mixed with the soil and add nutrients to the soil. Cleansing the environment. Number 2, reuse by the producers. What is the meaning of reuse by producers? Now that these nutrients are mixed with the soil, they will again dissolve in the water. The roots of the plants again absorb them, and the plant flourishes. Again, the plant giving rise to the fruits and the flowers. Reuse by plants. So that is the concept to understand. Fertility of the soil I already mentioned. The next is help in nitrogen fixation and all. It is also helping in the process of fixation of the nitrogen. See there, the ammonia is converted into nitrates by nitrophile bacteria. It is just a step of nitrogen fixation that we are talking about.
Also, we see that if we add ashes to the soil, then it becomes more fertile.
ashes to the soil will only give the inorganic contents.
Or we can leave it for a whole year. So
Aha. But anyways, ashes, now that I talk about a dead pigeon and the ash, the dead pigeon is also releasing a whole lot of organic and inorganic both. But if I only talk about the ashes of some other substances burned, not of an animal body, only of some paper or some other substance, then it is only inorganic. Basically, it is inorganic. See there's a question, read that. What will happen if decomposers are not there? Just read on your own. That's a basic thing. 2-mark question. It as it is answering your paper also at times. What happens if decomposers are not there?
So what are putrefying bacteria?
Putrefying bacteria are decomposing bacteria. Decomposing bacteria. Okay. Okay. Now let us go to the next topic, food chains. What are food chains? The feeding relationship in different among different organisms in any environment. Now this is a typical food chain. What are some of the concepts that we're going to learn from this food chain is the first thing is when you write a food chain, this is the way you write a food chain. Food chain cannot be written in 2 lines. Food chain has to be written in 1 single line. So you'll have to fit it, whatever the example. Now, is it very difficult to fit in 1 line? No, because every particular food chain, if I talk about, what are these groups of organisms known as? These groups of organisms are known as the trophic levels. And the trophic levels are either 3 or 4 or 5. So what are some of the concepts of the food chain to remember? Any particular food chain you talk about, the minimum number of trophic levels will be 3. In some it will be 4. Maximum it will be 5. Certain food chains, maybe in the aquatic food chains or the desert food chains we come across, sometimes it may be 6, but number of food chains with 6 trophic levels rare. We'll learn why. So what is the first point I am talking about? The first point that I am talking about is in case of any type of a food chain, what are the different groups of organisms known as? They are known as the links. Links are also known as the trophic levels. And how many can be the trophic levels? Trophic levels can minimum be 3, maximum be 5. Next is every particular food chain will always start with a producer. Every particular food chain will always start with producer. We will generally not come across any food chain starting with a heterotroph. Is it possible? No, it is not possible because these plants will be receiving the sunlight, and whatever amount of sunlight they receive, they are trapping only 1% of the sunlight always. I talk about the tropical areas, subtropical areas. The cold countries also, every time, whatever amount of sunlight, the incident sunlight, this is known as incident sunlight. Whatever amount of sunlight falls in the plants, are the plants utilizing all of it? No, only 1% of it, and that is enough for the plant. The plants are utilizing only 1% of the incident sunlight for what? A process known as photosynthesis. And by the process of photosynthesis, what are they preparing? That you know, it prepares organic food. And that's the reason the rest of the animals directly or indirectly are dependent on the producers. So now that we name all of them, I would say that this is the producer and rest from here all are consumers. But based on what type of organisms they are, consumers again has got different names. Let us try naming them. I talk about one. This is the producer. I want all of you to write one example. After that, I'll give you one more. One example of a food chain, producer. Then what will this be known as? This is definitely a consumer, but this will be termed as the primary consumer. Then what type of an organism is a primary consumer? Organism which is directly dependent on plants. Then what are primary consumers also known as? Primary consumers are also known as herbivores. We go to the next. What about this one? Now, this frogs that we come across. Now, here in this case, I'm talking about the frogs are the secondary consumers. Secondary consumers, but to be very specific, I should say definitely it is carnivorous. Rather, it is more insectivorous. Insectivorous. But instead of the frogs, yes, we can have so many other animals also which are feeding on the grasshoppers. It can be the instead of the grasshoppers, it can be the instead of the frogs, it can be the lizards also, some other reptiles also. So some other reptiles, lizards. So all these are small carnivores. They will be considered as small carnivores. So I would say this is the secondary consumer. What are secondary consumers also known as? Secondary consumers are also known primary consumer. This will be small carnivores. We don't write small, but it is understood that they are generally small carnivores. We go to the next. What are these? These are tertiary consumers. Now that we are talking about the tertiary consumers, what will they be also termed as? These are also the big carnivores. Now instead of the snakes, we can also talk about certain examples where we can fit in the foxes and the lion, etc. Next is the top consumers. What are these? These are the last level consumers in any food chain. These are the top consumers. What are they also known as? In this example, the vultures. What are they known as? Scavengers. These are the scavengers. In certain examples, it can be the decomposers. So how many links did we write? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let us talk about the first one. The plants. How much of the energy does it produce? Maybe. Let us assume that it has obtained the sunlight and 1% of the incident sunlight it uses and it produces food. Now, for example, let me understand an example here only. Let me just say that these plants are producing 100 1000 kilojoules of energy. We are talking about energy. Food means what? Food is what type of energy? Photosynthesis converts what type of energy to what type of energy? Slight energy to chemical energy. Chemical energy, organic food. No, you can say that if the plants are utilizing 1% of the sunlight in manufacturing organic food by the process of photosynthesis, let us assume there can be variable numbers. Now, let us assume that the plants have prepared this much of the energy, produced this much of the energy. What about the grasshoppers? Are the grasshoppers getting all of it when they are feeding the plants? No, they are not getting all of it. Why? Because the plants will be utilizing almost 90% of this energy for its own process of transport, cell division, growth, etc. So now that the grasshopper feeds on these plants, how much of the energy does the grasshopper get? Nothing more than 10% of it. Nothing more than 10% of it. Again, say for example, the grasshoppers has obtained this much of the energy. I'm talking about only from one example, one animal, one plant it feeds on. The grasshopper is feeding on only one plant and this much of the energy it acquires. What about now this amount of the energy? The next organism that will be the frogs. The frogs feeding on the grasshopper. How much of the energy it is supposed to get? Only 10%. how much of the energy it is supposed to get here. I talk about the snakes feeding on the frogs, only this much. And if I talk about the vultures feeding on the snakes, how much of this?
0.1.
So is it possible we are talking about any other organism here, the 6th or the 7th level? Then how much of the energy that 6th or the 7th level organism would get? It would be just negligible by the way of the food. That means for the 7th organism, feeding will be almost, meaning by the way of feeding, the organism is not getting any energy. It is something like that. So when we are feeding, we are definitely supposed to get some amount of energy by the way of food. So if I write here, or when we come across examples, why don't we find food chains with 6 or 7 or 8 trophic levels? This is your explanation. What are you supposed to write? Every organism, when it feeds on the previous trophic level, it can obtain only 10% of the energy. So since it can obtain only 10% of the energy, after the 4th and the 5th trophic level, the amount of the energy drop is quite a lot. After the 5th trophic level, the amount of energy that an organism can receive will be negligible. So that means for that organism, feeding on the vulture would be of no use. Even if it is feeding, it is not getting any energy at all. So it is something like that. So that's the question you get in your paper, that why food chains have maximum 5 trophic levels. Is it possible for any food chain to have 8 or 9 trophic levels? Give reason. So this concept you have to justify. What is this concept known as? This concept that we talk about is known as the 10% law of energy flow. This is known as the 10% law of energy flow. What is the meaning? The energy flows from one trophic level to the other, but only by 10% of it. Then, what is the grasshopper doing with the rest of the energy? Meaning, how much of the energy it is utilizing? Almost 90% of the energy the grasshopper is utilizing. For what? Movement, growth, cell division, transport of nutrients, etc., absorption. So gaseous exchange. So कितने सारे जो भी processes है, the organism is going with, energy is required. So almost every organism utilizes 90% of the energy for its own metabolism. So now, when we are talking about one more concept again for the food chains, always to remember, food chains trophic levels cannot be more than 6. I told you, and every organism utilizes, every trophic level utilizes 90% of the energy of the whatever energy it has absorbed from the previous trophic level for its own metabolism. For its own metabolism. So this you'll have to remember. When I say metabolism, you can break up two, right? The process of growth and division and transport and the process of reproduction. So all this has to be mentioned when you are writing about metabolism. What is this concept known as? 10% law of energy flow. But now tell me, in nature, is it always necessary that the grasshopper will feed on only the guava plants? Necessary hai? The grasshopper will only feed on the guava? No, not necessary. The grasshopper sometimes may feed on the guava, sometimes again on the other type of plants, the apple trees, or sometimes on the small grasses, or sometimes on. So at one particular period of time, in 1 hour also, it is possible that the grasshopper is feeding on 4 different types of plants. That is how it will maintain its energy requirement. So that is very well understood. Same if I talk about, will the frogs only and only feed on the grasshoppers? No, the frogs can also feed on another type. So many different types of ants are there, beetles are there. So the frogs will constantly keep on feeding on so many other, snails are there. Same, the snakes will not only feed on the frogs. The snakes have got so many other alternatives in nature. The snakes may feed on different type of amphibians. It can feed on smaller wriggling worms and all. So many other different type of organisms the snakes will feed on. That means this concept that we are talking about, the linear relationship of a food chain. Is it always working in nature? No. There is always a complex nature of food chains working. And what is that complex nature of food chain known as? Where are multiple food chains work together? What is that called? Food web. See that diagram there? The food web. What is the concept of the food web? The concept of the food web is large number of food chains working together. And that is actually happening in nature. That is actually happening in nature. So if you see there, that when we are looking into the food web, this is just one example that is given here. There is one example of a food web. So if you see that the mice is also feeding on the same plant, the rabbit is also feeding, and the small birds also feeding on the same plant. So on that same plant, there will be 10 different type of organisms feeding and obtaining energy. No. Then again, if you see that the mice, the snakes are also feeding on the mice, and some big birds are also feeding on the mice. No, the big birds like the hawk and the vulture, they can also feed on the mice. So any type of an organism you think of, it will definitely be eaten by at least 4 or 5 types of organisms, and every organism will eat on another 4 or 5 type of organisms. What is the general rule? Every organism is eating and being eaten. So that's the rule. Every organism is eating. Yes, the grasshopper is eating 4 or 5 types, and the frogs are eating on the grasshopper. So every organism will be eating on variety, and it itself will be. So now if you look into that food web, can you just, I'll give you 1 minute time. Can you just count and tell me how many food chains are there? Count and tell me how many. Ismail. There's one in your book also. See there, one example of food web in your book also.
Which one?
No, this one, this page 186 में check करो. Page 14 है. No, 8. 8. You'll have to check like this: the plants, the rabbit, the hawk. एक line पूरा complete करना. एक line पूरा complete. Okay, so if you check, so this type of a question you'll have to.
Not 9.
8.
Not 9.
See. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 12. 9 concept. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9. Now 8 है. अच्छा correct. हाँ, यहाँ से यहाँ again. Then also we have to take another food chain. See there, the eating bird says straight away go to the frog and then another. Yes. So now, so this type of examples you get in your exam where you will be asked questions on the type of the food web. So this idea check करो. Now see there, how to write them in the form of pyramid. The same concept, how to write in the form of a pyramid. Now this we will do in your notebook. Draw one pyramid exactly like this and try fitting in exactly this thing there in the pyramid. How? Let us try. Draw one pyramid. Draw one pyramid to show the trophic levels. ये same चीज को you can represent this way, or you can also represent in the form of a pyramid. Let us try with the help of a pyramid. Draw it fast and draw a little bit big. Draw it fast and draw a little bit big. Draw the pyramid, all of you fast. Draw it big, otherwise it's not that. It's too small. How many levels should be there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At least now I'm talking about this food chain. So there should be 5 levels that you draw. There should be 5 levels that you draw. The pyramid that you are drawing should be having 5 levels. 5 trophic levels. 1,
None there.
2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 trophic levels. Little bit bigger. Now, after you have drawn the 5 levels, what are you going to write in the center? What to write in the center? The trophic levels you have to write down.
In
Producers.
that textbook, there's only 4 levels. And given in
That is, they have taken only a food chain with 4 levels they have taken. When it is 5 levels, you have to draw 5. When it is 3, you have to draw 3. So it can be 3 or 4 or 5. Okay, let us start there. Write here primary producer. Producer. Exactly the same thing that I have done here. Producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and after it, top consumers. Top. Then on the left hand side, you will write down examples, whatever examples. Now on the left hand side, you write your own examples. I have given you one example here, right? Try writing your own example. On the left hand side, you have to write down the names of the organisms. Write down your own. On the left hand side, now write down the names of the organisms. What happened?
the 38 consumers are top consumers.
So in the center it will be trophic levels. On the left you write down. On the left you write down.
In the examples, like there are only 4 or 3, but we have to write 5.
What is it?
In the book, there are 4 like, examples given, but in them,
Which example?
all the examples. Like only 4 proper.
Which examples you are talking about?
You take anyone, like second also, second one also,
Yeah.
grass, insects, frog and birds.
Previous.
You can take examples with 3. You can take examples with 4. You can take examples with 5. So I have shown you the maximum one with 5. So 5 के साथ करो. After that you can try with 4 trophic levels. You make one with 5 trophic levels. So first in the center you write down the trophic level, the names of the trophic levels you write. On the left you should write down the names of the organism. तो यहाँ पे क्या लिखना है? Plants.
Examples.
Example. Left में हमेशा examples लिखना है. Plant यहाँ पे क्या लिखना है? According to my example, grasshopper. So you write first an example of your own. लिखा? And then on the other side you will have to write down.
First.
नहीं, not that. The first trophic level, second trophic level needs जरूरत है. Producers, you can write like this: herbivores, small carnivore. These are the first, second, third, fourth. So that way actually you are supposed to write. What I am telling you, you write here examples. On the left you should write down examples. देखो. Okay. This side you are writing down their category: producers, herbivores, small carnivores. If your food chain has only small and large carnivores, then you write only that: carnivores, large carnivore, and you are writing here a scavenger, so it will be a scavenger. If there is any omnivore in your example you have written down, then you can write down that omnivore. So what is the type? That is what you should write on the right. Example you will write on the left, and the category, the trophic levels you will write in the center. That is how you should write down a pyramid. The trophic levels shown in the form of a pyramid. What's happening?
It was bad.
You're messing up with everything. चलो इस तरह का फटाफट काम खत्म करो. Done. The concept of food chain, food web.
When in top consumers only 7 GB come also this heterodox parasite people.
If it is an example, then these type of examples also will change. You can write examples with decomposers also. But these are the most common ones. That is called detritus food chain. इसको बोलते हैं grazing food chain. These are the most common ones. Grazing food chains. Detritus food chains के examples भी अलग होगा. Plants, then earthworm, then beetles. So इस तरह से आएगा. Examples examples भी अलग होगा. Big animals. What happened? Sleepy. What time you came from school? Straight after that, yeah. Morning. What time school? Sleep early. Then again evening classes started. What time you sleep? 2 o'clock. No. Then 10:30. That's good. Done, all of you done? Now let us talk about another small topic, that is biomagnification. What is biological magnification? Try understanding this. Biological magnification. What is the meaning of this? Biological magnification means, now that I talk about all these different groups of organisms, I may understand that this grasshopper which is feeding on the plants, or the grasshopper may feed on 5 different types of plants. So this grasshopper, listen, the grasshopper feeds on 5 different types of plants. The grasshopper may feed on small 0.01 milligram of some pesticides along with the food, with the leaves. Now these grasshoppers, again the same thing, the frogs will be eating on or feeding on another 5 types of insects. So the frogs are consuming small amounts of these poisonous chemical substances from different group of organisms that it is feeding on. So harmful chemicals. Now I talk about in the concept of biomagnification. What my understanding is, what is the concept of biomagnification? The application is with this, but now that I talk about biomagnification, always try understanding. Biomagnification will be more in a plant, or more in a frog, or more in human. Now what is the concept of biomagnification? Biomagnification means how much of poisonous chemical substances like DDT, like various other different type of pesticides, when we are talking about the different type of pesticides which are now used in the soil, BHC, pesticides, hydrocarbons, DDT, all these which are used in the soil as fungicides and herbicides and pesticides, is it only concentrated on the plant? No, by the way of the food chain, it is getting spread out. So it is getting spread out. So can I understand that the big carnivore is never feeding on plants, but is that big carnivore escaping the accumulation of DDT and BHC in its blood, in its body? No, never mind, it is not directly feeding on the plants, but it is feeding on a herbivore which is feeding on a plant. Or it is feeding on 10 herbivores which had one single herbivore must have fed on. Come here and sit. Don't do that. Every time you do this, it's so annoying. Come here and sit. Either with this girl or with that girl. Always. What is this? You are a 10th standard student, you should be so smart in the class. Ask 10 different doubts. Doubts to kabhi aaj tak hai hi nahi. You are busy cracking fingers or tying the hair or this and that. Don't do that. So now, when we are talking about biomagnification, what is the concept? The concept I am saying is, if I talk about a carnivore, am I to understand that this carnivore will never have any accumulation of these chemical substances? Not at all, because even though this particular large carnivore is not directly feeding on plants, but it must be feeding on some other small carnivores. And that small carnivore is feeding on the herbivore. That herbivore is feeding directly on the plant. So what is this concept you are trying to understand? What is biomagnification? Accumulation of this harmful chemical substances. But why the concept of magnification here? Magnification will be maximum in what type of organisms? It will be maximum in these type of organisms, or here, it will be maximum in this type of organisms. Can you tell me why? Biomagnification maximally human और most complex organisms में सबसे ज़्यादा होती है. Why? Omnivorous. Because we are omnivorous. So yes, because we are consuming plants from 10 different plants. Now say suppose today at least if 2 different type of vegetable you have consumed, so small amount of these pesticides have entered the body. And all throughout the day at least 2 or 3 different type of animal products if we have consumed or we are going to consume, then from those animal products also some amount of this type of DDT or pesticides must have entered the body. So all throughout the day, by the way of the crops and the vegetables and the fruits and the animal products, all these components are getting their entry inside our body, and that will always be maximally in the top consumers. It will be maximally in a top consumer. It will be maximally in a complex organism. It will be maximally in a omnivore. Always. But why? Why the worry? The worry because these chemical substances, once they get their entry inside our body, they will not get broken down into simple substances in the liver and get released out. They will get accumulated in the blood and in the tissues, resulting in improper functioning, resulting in improper functions of the body cells. So see that concept, biomagnification, at least 1 or 2 examples you'll have to remember also. And the story always starts whenever you are writing anything about the concept of biomagnification, always remember the examples of the huge number of pesticides which are actually given for the crops, flowers, fruits nowadays. So that is the concept of biomagnification. Next is, we talk about 2 major environmental concerns here. What are the 2 major environmental concerns? The first one is ozone layer depletion. Let us talk about that. Ozone layer depletion. Simple concept of ozone layer depletion you are supposed to understand. Now, to talk about the concept of ozone layer depletion, what is the first concept? The first concept is, what is ozone? What is ozone? Ozone is a triatomic form of oxygen. Where is ozone present? In the atmosphere. In the atmosphere, there is a layer of air, there is a layer of atmosphere which is actually rich in ozone. And that specific layer is known as the ozonosphere rather. That is known as the ozonosphere. Now this ozonosphere that we are talking about, where the ozone naturally gets formed, combination of the oxygen atoms, and that naturally gets formed. Is this ozone layer of importance for us? We are talking about, if I now understand, this is the earth. Is that ozone layer of any benefit for us?
Yes.
Can you tell me what is the benefit of the ozone layer? UV rays. So now the sun's harmful radiation. So I may understand in the atmosphere there are various layers of air, and one such layer that we are talking about is the ozonosphere in the stratosphere. So this is the ozonosphere. What is the form of oxygen, you are asked? The form of oxygen is this. Naturally gets oxygen in the triatomic form. It is naturally getting formed. What is the benefit? I just now asked you. The benefit is the harmful radiations of the sun cannot penetrate the surface of the earth. That is the benefit. But then, now that we are talking about that, now we talk about depletion. Why depletion? Why depletion is a concern for a number of decades now, for at least 2 decades now. This concern that this ozone layer in certain geographical areas is becoming thin. Rather, the concept in the last decade also was there is a ozone hole. Now, ozone hole means when I try telling you ozone hole, actually looking, am I supposed to tell you something like this has happened in any part of the any geographical area or the atmospheric region in any part of the globe? No, nothing like this has happened so far. Nothing like this has happened so far. What has happened is little bit of a thinning has happened. Maybe something like this. Little bit of a thinning has happened in certain geographical areas, and this is what a worry. Now, which geographical areas are we talking about? Near the continent.
Near the North Pole.
Near the North Pole. So when we are talking about cold countries in that region, also near continents like Australia. So when we are talking about why those geographical continents till they recognized because of certain geographical factors, air pressure, atmospheric pressure, etc., etc. That is what has been stated. Then what is the reason? How are we responsible? What is the reason for this depletion? Now, depletion actually means little bit thinning of the ozone layer which has happened. But now that the thinning has happened, what is the problem? Now that the thinning has happened, the UV radiation penetrating in this part of the globe in large amount. The UV radiation is penetrating at this particular region of the globe in large amount. Then what are the problem people of this region suffering from? Plants of this region suffering from many problems and deformities. Plants of this region does not grow till their optimum size also. They are stunted. Seed germination does not happen. Seed germination does not happen in the proper regular time. Leaves are always rolling up very fast, yellowing, and the plants suffer from various different type of deformities, black lights, and all those the blights of the plant that we understand. These are various different type of plant diseases. What about human? Skin cancer, skin rashes. Skin rashes is a common feature for children. Skin rashes and subjecting to skin cancer later. Young children are suffering from rashes all over, and then that subjects to skin cancer by the time they grow. Another problem is children suffer from difficulty in vision. Adults suffer from cataracts. So these are so many different type of abnormalities that the plants and the animals suffer from. We have to find out, we'll come across in the next class, what is the root cause and what are some chemical reactions that you are going to come across that you have to present in your answer, you should write in your answer. The next class I'll give you some 5-6 questions, very patent, which you get from this part of the chapter, the cause and the effect, and what can be done. Will give your books back. One more. Sorry, girls, give your books back.
I